I forgot you're going to be all prettified. You're going to
Well,
be dressed
part of
up.
the idea was that to do this right afterwards, just as a quick post discussion, but also I would still be in my suit and makeup, so I would look dapper for the YouTube audience
Right.
uh, of like 30 people with insomnia. So that would be that would be
That's right.
so.
Clearly.
Yeah, so in addition to doing this as an audio only podcast, we could do this as a video as well. Um, but did you see the segment? What did you think of it? I guess we should start
Well, I
there.
mean, obviously, I agree with pretty much everything that you said. We are the character of the nation is an immigrant nation, of course. It's just, and of course, I'm a huge proponent of pointing out the Southern strategy. So I appreciate your updating it for the MSNBC viewers. Was
Yeah,
there anything that you wanted to add to what you said?
well, there's a lot of like history and background that yeah, I think Ari alluded to in the segment that we can talk about in terms of Southern strategy. So Cornell Belcher, who's an MSNBC contributor as well, a really terrific pollster, worked for the DNC, Obama, etc. He wrote a piece in the Washington Post in November after the election had been called for Biden, saying the Southern strategy was now dead, and he pointed out specifically
Did he
that
really?
yeah, he did. He said that Southern strategy is dead, and he had a very good analysis, I thought, where he said, how Trump ran all of these ads about crime, and ran about law and order. Very traditionally, the traditional Nixon Southern strategy was what Trump was using, where you use law and order and crime as a very specific sort of button to push, trying to go at white anxiety over black crime. And Belcher pointed out how Trump in his speeches, and I do remember this, he talked about how, saying suburban women, you got to worry about people from the projects coming to your neighborhood. Like Trump actually specifically said that, like right out
Yeah,
loud,
right. Just
like no
recently,
one's
just
hiding it.
just in this last election cycle, right?
Right. And then Belcher pointed out how like suburban women voted overwhelmingly for Biden. And how so many independents, moderate Republicans, the best example was the state of Georgia, right, where in suburban Atlanta, Biden won fairly handily in suburban Atlanta. And that was something that Republicans had won every election prior to that. So he was arguing the Southern strategy was fully dead, that there was virtually no way that you could revive these race-based attacks that Republicans had been using for years, specifically about crime, which crime is a very big one. I mean, obviously, Willie Horton is the most famous example, I think, of this. I think if people are not familiar with Willie Horton, those were the ads run by Lee Atwater in 1988, talking about how Michael Dukakis had freed
Right.
an African American, not freed, had allowed on probation an African American criminal, Willie Horton, who subsequently performed more crimes, and then
Was that
really,
the famous turnstile ad?
yes, where the famous turnstiles, they were going in and out of the turnstiles.
Right. They trying
Uh,
to depict Democrats as just having a revolving door to the prison system.
right, very soft on crime, etc. That was a very big concept. And there was a story that Lee Atwater got the idea for the ad, among other things, where he had done focus groups. And this woman in Alabama, when she was told about all of Michael Dukakis's views, she started yelling, "He's a liberal," And then Atwater kind of knew he had something there. He knew
Right.
he really had an attack. So Belcher really, sort of talks about the history of this, and how Trump really used very old school Southern strategy in terms of going at African Americans, attacking African Americans, specifically on the crime issue, and
Mhm.
just really using all the Nixon language that Nixon had employed in '68, and it didn't work. And so Belcher said, "Well, the Southern strategy is over; it's dead. Republicans can no longer use this playbook anymore." Was his argument.
But
Uh,
but did it really not work because Trump did have record turnouts?
Yeah, I mean, it is. He did have record turnout, but Biden had far more. All right.
Sure.
And it also should be pointed out that Democrats did not do a GOTV program. We did not do traditional door knocking.
Right.
Uh, yeah, which
Because of COVID, right.
because of COVID. Yes, and so that should be pointed out that was a major factor in Democratic turnout, which is still, though, was record for Joe Biden. But Belcher was arguing that this was kind of the best Republicans could do with this strategy, was what Trump did, and Trump still falls short. So that was sort of his argument that the Southern strategy is dead. Republicans clearly did not get the memo. Not only on immigration, if you look at like the Asian American hate crime issue, where you saw Chip Roy just talking, first of all, talk about lynching in a positive way. If you saw any of that video where he talks about this, and then like really deny that there was any issue with Asian American hate crimes. That's still really part of what I would call a new Southern strategy, where it's kind of been expanded beyond the traditional black versus white binary.
Right, just all other.
Yeah, just everybody. So if you have whites versus African Americans on BL about Black Lives Matters issues, you have whites versus Latinos on immigration issues, you have whites versus Asians on this Asian American crime issue. I would also argue like global warming, for example. I remember Trump very famously talking about how this was a Chinese hoax, was made by Trump into sort of an anti-Asian issue.
Right. They demonize Asians on obviously coronavirus.
Correct. Yes.
And trade inequities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, all kinds of issues that I'd never really thought of as possibilities for racism. Trump somehow found these things out and realized that he could do that. And so there's just like a wide sort of battlefield that Republicans are not playing on with what I consider to be like this new Southern strategy.
So you're saying that the Southern strategy didn't die; it just morphed.
Yeah, I think it did not. I think it just. I think that what Cornell is saying, in sort of the very traditional Southern strategy, that I think is over. I don't think that you can quite just focus entirely on African American and fears of anxiety about African American crime to try to get these suburbanites who are in fear of this or try to stoke fear of this anymore. I don't think that that's possible. I think Republicans kind of intuitively know this, which is why they've had to expand this battlefield.
But but they've just expanded it. They haven't given up the base strategy. Saying that the Southern strategy is dead is like saying that Zack Snyder's DC Warner Brothers career is over, when clearly
it is. I mean, Netflix. He has a Netflix deal, and I believe Warner Brothers announced that.
No, but we all thought he was done, and then he came out with he's fooled people into thinking that.
Right. It's like Michael Corleone in Godfather 3. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Right. Like so that's sort of the idea. I think Republicans intuitively know that they can't use a traditional black versus white binary. I think that they are sort of expanding out this battlefield much more. The question that it really raises, though, is that the demographics of the country are changing. And we alluded to like what happened in California when Pete Wilson did Prop 187 and how the entire state moved over the course of 15 years entirely into the Democratic column. And so that's something that I kind of think will happen nationally. I think where we are in 2021, I think 15 years from now, I think we will be in a very different place.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, they seem to be also shifting that strategy into trying to pit marginalized groups against each other. So they try to expand by taking one previously marginalized group and setting it against another marginalized group.
Yeah, there is some evidence that along the border, they specifically did this. They specifically attacked or brought up Black Lives Matters to Latino voters along the border region, and also in Florida, that they did the same sort of strategy. I have not seen any sort of scientific evidence about this in terms of, whether I know they definitely ran ads. I don't know about whether or not they actually were in any way successful with it. I do think that COVID, it should be pointed out, in the lockdowns, if people were wondering why did Trump do a little bit better with non-white working class people, I think a lot of that had to do with the lockdowns. The lockdowns specifically hurt working class people. They specifically hurt people in the service industry. And a lot of those folks are non-white, African-American, Latino, Asian working class people who really wanted the lockdowns to end. And I think that they really, some of them did vote for Trump because they thought that they should bring about an end to the lockdowns. You know,
Which,
I
of
saw
course, is insane because it all happened under Trump's watch.
it all happened under Trump's watch, and there was no strategy to end the lockdowns. But you know, he did dance around that last month and really sort of harp on this issue. And I do think it was sort of effective. If you look at the most accurate poll of 2020, which was the IBT poll, at the beginning, you know, Biden had a 9-point lead in the beginning of October in that poll, and it went down to 4.5 points by election day, which is what Biden won by, 4.5 points. And over the course of that month, Biden's lead steadily diminished as Trump hammered the lockdowns tremendously. And I saw a report here in Southern California. They interviewed an African American woman who voted for Trump, and the reason was is she worked at Disneyland. She was convinced that Trump would reopen Disneyland and end the lockdowns. And when the election was called for Biden, she cried because she didn't think that she would be able to get her job back and provide a livelihood for her family. So I do think that that aspect of it really did help Trump more than I think some of the stuff that's been reported about sort of you know, African Americans versus Latinos or Latinos versus Asians, et cetera. I think the working class component element of the lockdowns and how it hurt people who were working class really did, I think.
So you feel it was mainly an economic issue, that it was the Republican hammering on economic talking points.
Yeah, just ending
allowed them inroads.
Correct. I think ending the lockdowns. I think one of the aspects is that you know, it was very difficult and very rough for a lot of working class people, and it still is, by the way. The lockdowns haven't ended, but Biden with the stimulus is really giving them some very direct aid to try to help with this. But it was all very, very, you know, difficult for working class people. You also have to keep in mind that we didn't get like that stimulus check because there was that impasse between Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi, you know, but before the election about the stimulus checks, which Biden resolved by simply just increasing the amount and getting a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate to pass it. So I think that, you know, Biden solved a lot of the problems, but I do think that that was something. I think the visual. I think we have to look at the visual more than the words. There was this visual of Trump dancing around at rallies, unafraid of COVID, ripping his mask off after he'd gotten COVID on the White House.
Right.
Visuals for people who wanted the lockdowns to end, and that included a lot of non-white working class people. I think that was what really helped him close that gap in that last month. I think that was.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean,
you
mentioned Steve Mnuchin,
right?
Producer of
Justice League, right? Yes.
Was it Justice League or Batman versus Superman?
He did Justice League. I believe he's on Justice League, but I know he's definitely Batman versus Superman. I know he did Wonder Woman. I believe he produced Wonder Woman, which I do not know how any of this was remotely possible. I also haven't seen any interviews with people who worked with him in Hollywood.
I don't think anyone wants to acknowledge having worked with Steve Mnuchin.
Right. I don't think that that's probably accurate, but yeah, that's Steve Mnuchin. Definitely did do all of those things. So, but yeah, that's that. But that's sort of the take on it. But I think historically, if you look at it, you know, embracing immigration has just been a tremendous vote getter. It was a tremendous vote getter for Ronald Reagan, for Bush Sr., for George W. Bush. You know, was very popular for when Kennedy did it, when FDR said we are all descended from immigrants. You know, Truman said we are a nation of immigrants. Kennedy celebrated his immigration past for his family as an Irish Catholic family. LBJ talked about how we were a nation of immigrants, and in front of the Statue of Liberty in '65, he signed the ending of racial quotas for immigration, which until 1965 existed. There were racial quotas that were in place for immigrants, so those were all removed by LBJ, which allowed, for example, Asian American immigration to the country in such significant numbers because there were significant quotas, and also Latino immigration to the country because
were those quotas, those Asian American quotas, a holdover from the
you're right, the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yeah, Exclusion Act.
Chinese Exclusion Act. Yeah, that was exactly what it was. In 1965, I mean, and LBJ talks about this in his speech. Basically, three countries provided 80% of America's immigrants. It was Ireland, it was Italy, and it was actually the UK. I mean, or England, actually, Great Britain, and that's where America's immigrants all came from. Those three countries, and they were specifically allowed to come in from those three countries. Um, and so if you look at like Nicolas Sarkozy, the former president of France, who I think is now going to jail,
Yes.
his
That's a
family.
bad look.
Yeah, he's descended from Hungarian Jews. They actually were trying to get into the United States. They were barred because in the 1920s, Jewish immigrants were discriminated against on a racial basis by the United States, but they were accepted into France. And so, the Sarkozys are now a French family as opposed to an American family, but they could have easily been an American family.
Right.
So,
once a great story of immigration. This week, maybe not so much of a great story.
Right, that may not be
for immigration,
but that may not be a particularly great example. But that's certainly the case. That's mainly because America, we took in all these immigrants and then we kind of clamped it all down, and that's what I consider to be sort of a terrible American tradition. But immigrants come in through the golden door and then turn around and close it shut. So that's sort of part of the tradition as well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Anything else on the show that you wanted to follow up on?
Well, as I said, this is basically this immigration reform, the comprehensive immigration reform that Joe Biden sent to Congress. It's basically the same piece of legislation that we had for 15 years, started as Kennedy McCain. Both men now are deceased. So that tells you how long this issue has been around. Biden, Obama, Hillary Clinton all supported this legislation in Congress 15 years ago. Obama was unable to get it through. George W. Bush was unable to get it through. Obama was unable to get it through. And now, basically, Trump obviously had no interest in it, but now it's Biden's turn. And there's really no reason for it. I mean, this is more popular than it's ever been. And I think that what has happened is I think Democrats and pro-immigration Republicans have really just been spooked by the incessant drone on Fox News on this issue, where there's the constant demonization of immigration, and they believe that this is what people really believe. So
they love repeating their talking points over on Fox News.
Correct. That's exactly right. So, but yeah, those are all basically sort of issues that I think we would.
Oh, we lost your audio.
Yeah, I had another call just coming in, so I had to.
Oh, do you need to take that?
No, I don't. I just needed to make sure I don't, screw up, make sure I don't take it. But yeah, that's basically. So that was kind of all I wanted to highlight. If there's but that's kind of the purpose I think of these discussions, was just to sort of go a little bit more into depth in some of these issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and not excuse your pro 4-hour cut of
the Justice
League.
Yeah, I stand by that. That's a good movie. I thought that was a good movie.
Give it a score out of 10. Out of 10, what would you rate the Snyder cut of Justice League? Okay, 7. I'll buy 7, because my argument here is that Zack Snyder has taken the same test 3 times, failed the first 2 times, and gotten a 70% on the exact same test, and now everyone's praising him. So 70 is a adequate score.
Question. So I would put Man of Steel at a 3 or a 4, maybe 3.5 out of 10.
That's accurate, sure.
Yeah, and then I would actually, in a weird way, I would put Batman versus Superman a little bit higher.
Right, because it has good casting.
It has good casting, yes. It
Choices, right.
Yeah, Ben Affleck, actually very underrated. I think Jeremy Irons is actually very, very underrated. And then it also introduces Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman.
And Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa, I forgot, was actually in Batman vs. Superman. That's
right. And Ezra Miller is there too.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I think, is if you look at diversity, you have to give credit to Zack Snyder for casting Jason Momoa as Aquaman. That is not the traditional comic book Aquaman.
Right.
And he decided to take a chance on this. The traditional comic Aquaman is I guess Patrick Wilson, who plays Jason Momoa or Aquaman's rival in the Aquaman.
Right, Ocean Master, yes.
Ocean Master, yeah, that guy looks like the traditional comic book Aquaman. So yeah,
That's true. That is the irony of the casting, right?
yeah, it's yeah. So I think that's all to the credit. But I would say maybe Batman vs Superman maybe a 4 or 5. I would say at the most, maybe 4.5. I'd give it a little bit of a point up. But this is definitely, I think, easily the best of those movies.
Yeah. And Ezra Miller is, of course, David Carradine Asian.
Is he? I did not know. Oh, you said that.
No, I actually have no idea. He looks like he's someone that you would cast to play an Asian in a new version of Kung Fu if you didn't want to cast an actual Asian person.
Well, was Bruce Lee? Did Bruce Lee die? Was that what happened? Is that why he did not?
No, they just didn't think that people would like his accent. Yeah, it was just racism.
Yeah, that's rather unfortunate. But yeah, I did not know. I thought maybe Bruce Lee had died and they could not cast him. That was the reason.
No, the reason he went back to Asia and started making movies there was because they gave the Kung Fu series to David Carradine.
I did not know that was actually what it was.
Yeah, because Green Hornet had closed up shop, but he was excited about, hey, I'm going to pitch this Western Kung Fu series. And then Warner Brothers basically ran with it with David Carradine in the lead role. So he just said, I'm going to go back to Hong Kong and make action movies.
Another attempt at failed diversity was actually the Green Hornet movie, which was supposed to be directed by Stephen Chow.
Yes, that would have been a much better movie.
It would have been a much better movie. I don't know why it didn't work out. I think that there was a language barrier, is what I heard, that Stephen Chow did not know English. But I have a hard time imagining that they couldn't figure that out with a translator on set or something.
Right.
I just have a hard time figuring out why they would not been able to do that. But yeah, that was another example of a Green Hornet related failed diversity that would have actually really helped the movie a great deal. But yeah, so I definitely would put this. I would definitely put this at about a 7. I think. I think Ray Fisher is actually really great, and
No, that's probably the best thing about the Snyder Cut is the added Ray Fisher material, because we get to really flesh out that character.
Correct. Yeah, and I think his I was very skeptical when I was seeing his attacks on how Josh Whedon had cut his role and how upset he was. But watching this, I realized, wow, he really had a case. That really was really quality material that was left on the floor. So,
it's all true. It's all true.
So yeah, just wanted to just have a quick post segment tea.
Okay, great. We'll see if this is a postable.
Right.
Online.
Yeah, you can have Stacy and Sky take a look at it.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This has been Tea with Che and Shy, our post Che Day podcast. We'll hopefully do this every Tuesday after Che Day, right? And have Che just ruminate more on what's going on and talk about other current events. Like we could talk about Falcon and Winter Soldier next time.
Yeah, probably. Probably better next time.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.
Okay. Bye.